I was born mute, yet I married the emperor who would later exterminate my entire family, becoming his empress. When He Chao lifted the bridal veil and mockingly asked, "So you really are mute?" I knew then that he despised me. I never wanted to marry him either. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. My father is the all-powerful Prime Minister of the court, yet I am the unfavored legitimate daughter. My mother doesn't like me either, no matter how excellently I master the arts of lute, chess, calligraphy, and painting. All I ever receive from her is a faint remark, passable. Yet even my lesser talented half-sister, who pales in both skill and beauty compared to me, she willingly cradles in her arms, cooing my darling at every turn. All of this simply because I am mute, a natural-born cripple, at the age of 16. My father discovered my usefulness. He wanted me to marry the emperor of the dynasty, not to win favor, but to deliver a warning. The day before the grand wedding, my father, breaking all precedent, summoned me to his study and asked what my final wish was before entering the palace. I asked for one of his calligraphy books. Who in the great Zhou dynasty didn't know that my father's calligraphy was peerless, a style entirely his own, impossible to imitate. Scholars across the land coveted it like nothing else. Unfortunately, since he assumed the regency, he rarely wrote calligraphy personally anymore. This copybook counts as one of his few private works, and under heaven, there is only this one copy. He always stood behind his younger siblings, teaching them how to write, yet he was never willing to teach me. Perhaps out of guilt, he gave me this copybook. He Chao was only a year older than me. He was an emperor, but a puppet emperor. The first thing he did upon taking over the reins of government was to marry me as his empress. Following my father's orders, he lifted my bridal veil, his peach blossom eyes startlingly clear. I knew he hadn't dared get drunk. How laughable that his status was inferior to mine. A mute, He Chao raised my chin, his crimson wedding robes making his face glow like peach blossoms. The next instant came his mocking words, "So you really are mute?" I'd always known he despised me. What greater honor could there be for a mute girl than to marry the radiant emperor as his principal wife? Whoever asked for my opinion, who knew I never wanted this honor? But in the end, both he and I were just pawns to be moved at will. That night, we never consummated the marriage. The next day, my father sent 20 experienced palace maids to teach the emperor about human relations. He Chao was seething with anger, yet dared not show the slightest displeasure on his face. Instead, he had to thank my father. "I understand what must be done now. Thank you for your kindness, Prime Minister." Suddenly, I felt he was far more pitiful than I. He Chao pinned me beneath him, his eyes devoid of desire, filled only with intense hatred. He knew he had to consummate our marriage tonight. For my father's men were waiting just beyond the bed curtains. Just as he began to undo my garments, I pushed him away. He had no desire to touch me, neither had I. I pried open his chest, turned my head to grope under the pillow, and then pulled out a blood-stained handkerchief. He stiffened at the sight, and after a long pause, he finally spoke in a low voice. "You don't want me to touch you. See, everyone thinks I'm the one who got the better deal. I don't know where the strength came from." But I flipped over and sat on He Chao's body. Those 20 maids teaching human relationships weren't just tormenting He Chao alone. He Chao's face turned crimson red. I seized the opportunity to pinch his waist. He Chao let out an involuntary groan, then glared at me angrily. A sudden, inexplicable joy rose within me. He Chao stared at me for a long moment before finally falling silent. I didn't expect He Chao to cooperate much. For him, this situation was already more than just humiliation. I pitied him, so I took the initiative to force him into this charade, careful not to trample on his last fragile shred of dignity. After that day of consummating the marriage, my father actually became much kinder toward He Chao, even voluntarily dismissing the supervising maid stationed outside the bed curtains, ostensibly there to serve, but in truth to spy. He Chao no longer looked at me with the same undisguised disgust as when we first met. Combining kindness with severity, no wonder people say my father resembles an emperor more than He Chao does. For the sake of this consummation act, He Chao would stay overnight at my place every other day. Knowing He Chao disliked touching me, I found a brocade quilt to place between us in the middle of the bed. When he saw it, his eyes darkened with unreadable emotions. but he silently allowed it. Perhaps it was the loneliness of the late night. Or perhaps because a mute like me posed no real threat. But He Jiao would sometimes confide in me about court affairs, mostly mocking my father's authoritarianism, cursing his wolfish ambition. When his anger flared, he would even turn to glare at me sideways, as if wanting me, the eldest daughter of the Xie family now in his grasp, to suffer in my father's stead. Whenever this happened, I would simply close my eyes. After all, as a mute, I couldn't utter a word in response. Only when He Jiao's anger had somewhat subsided and he lay down to rest would I quietly open my eyes to look at him. My gaze would drift over his delicate brows and eyes, his straight nose, and finally settle on those faintly rosy lips. Only then would I realize, with a start, that He Jiao grew more handsome with each passing day. Were it not for my father who holds the emperor hostage to command the nobles, He Jiao would have been the most outstanding young man in the great Zhou dynasty, and should have married the most dazzling woman in the world, not me. Now afflicted with a mute disability, I gazed at the embroidered quilt bulging beside me and thought, perhaps this is for the best. Between He Jiao and me, it could only be this way, and would only ever be this way. As summer approached, He Jiao's mood noticeably brightened. Even the anger that often clouded his eyes was now tinged with youthful vigor. My father had returned the authority to grade this year's imperial examination papers to He Jiao, who personally selected the top 3 scholars. He Jiao had been under my father's control for many years, and once he got the chance, he wasted no time in building his own power. Watching the occasional curve of his lips, I could only feel cruelty in my heart. How could He Jiao possibly outmaneuver Chancellor Xie, who had held power for so many years? On the afternoon of the 5th day of the 12th month in the 9th year of Zhenhe, the long-awaited heavy snow finally arrived. I was just about to take a nap when I saw He Jiao striding in from outside. Covered in wind and snow, the frost he carried with him dispelled the warmth in the room. Ignoring how I was already half-sprawled on the bed, he grabbed my wrist fiercely, yanked me up, and said through gritted teeth, "The Xie family, truly remarkable." Those eyes, which had only just regained a spark of life, turned colder than ever before. I don't know how much emotion was contained in the gaze I directed at him, whether sorrow, pity, or helplessness. I had thought He Jiao would, as usual, only hurl harsh words at me, but unexpectedly, as if provoked by the emotions in my eyes, he suddenly grabbed the front of my robe with his other hand. "Do you know what Prime Minister Xie forced upon me in today's court session? He said that if the Empress and I still fail to produce an heir." He Jiao enunciated each word slowly, watching my increasingly uneasy expression. "Then come spring, we must adopt a son from the imperial clan." He Jiao had not yet reached the age of 20. My father's intentions were glaringly obvious. He wanted to depose this young emperor who was becoming increasingly difficult to control and install a new one. It was both provocation and threat. Among the newly selected scholars, there were inevitably those ambitious individuals who resented my father's control over the court. They were the best allies for He Jiao to seize power, and also the perfect candidates for my father to make an example of. I knew my father's methods well. He must have first indulged He Jiao, then closed the net today, dealing him a brutal blow. He Jiao had no choice. When those icy hands touched my shoulders, I thought to myself, He Jiao's hands were nothing like the warmth described in romantic novels. A sharp pain surged through my body, blurring my vision. It was as if I could hear He Jiao's cold voice from days ago. "When I exterminate the Xie family down to the 9th generation, I'll spare your life and let you leave on your own." Now, it seems he doesn't even want to spare me. The mute girl of the Xie family has ultimately become a prisoner of this deep palace, forever severed from freedom. Now there are only a few dozen days left until the coming spring, and He Jiao has been staying in my palace almost every night. Whether I give him cold looks or yield to him, He Jiao seems determined. The words he says to me most often are just these 4, to bed, for intimacy. Everyone in the palace says the Empress enjoys undiminished favor, but I know He Jiao is putting on a show for my father. Sure enough, after spring arrived, no one in the court ever brought up the matter of adopting an heir again. In midsummer May, news of my pregnancy finally spread. After He Jiao ordered the imperial physician to take my pulse, he stood dazed for a long while. After what felt like ages, he placed his hand gently on my belly and asked softly, "What is the Empress's maiden name?" Seeing that I remained silent for quite some time, he finally came to his senses and said somewhat awkwardly, "This emperor forgot." Then, turning to the maids, he commanded, "Someone, bring paper and ink." I didn't understand why He Chao was asking for my name at this moment, but I still complied and wrote 3 characters on the paper, Xie Wan Yang. Actually, my given name is simply the single character WN. My father, pitying my innate frailty, bestowed this character upon me, pity. WN11, whoever utters this name can't help but sigh, as if this single character encapsulates my entire life. Only my wet nurse would call me Wan Yang. Wan Yang. He Jiao murmured my name once, rolling it on his tongue. How could he truly not know my name? Perhaps he harbored the same thought as I, simply wanting to see the me that existed beyond my identity as the Xie family's legitimate daughter. He imitated my manner and wrote 3 characters on the paper, He Xiuming. He Jiao said this was the courtesy name the late emperor had long prepared for him. He Jiao, courtesy name Xiuming, Xiuming, the golden age of prosperity. These 2 characters carry such solemn weight. The late emperor spent his entire life on horseback, having lived nearly half his days in the saddle. It wasn't until he turned his attention to court affairs that he realized how pitifully few heirs he had. The eldest and second princes had followed the late emperor into battle and perished on the battlefield in their early years, while the third prince succumbed to smallpox. Only He Chao remained, whom the late emperor had witnessed being born. Placing great hopes on He Chao, the late emperor personally took him under his wing to educate and nurture him. Unfortunately, the late emperor had accumulated hidden ailments over too many years, long beyond the reach of medicine. In the year He Jiao turned 8, the late emperor passed away, and He Jiao ascended the throne. The then Prime Minister Xie acted as regent, personally selecting the era name as Jianhe. He Jiao handed me the characters he had written, lowered his eyes, and pressed his palm against my belly, saying, "This is my first child." It was He Xiuming's first child. He Chao conferred upon my father the title of Duke of the State, bestowing upon him the honorific loyal and brave. The Xie family enjoyed unparalleled prestige, surpassing even their former glory. Rumors spread through the streets during this time, claiming that Prime Minister Xie had deceived the emperor, and that He Chao, the son of heaven, had bowed his head in submission to my father as if the ruler had become the subject, and the subject the ruler. In truth, these matters were plain for all to see, yet none dared to speak of them openly. He Chao took this matter extremely seriously, not only specifically identifying the troublemakers behind the rumors but also beheading them and displaying their heads on the city gates as a warning. This blatant act of currying favor with my father was scorned by the people as the most spineless emperor of Great Zhou. He Chao remained utterly unfazed by the rumors. Despite the growing unrest in both the court and among the commoners, he still came to see me immediately after court sessions. Pregnancy coincided with the scorching summer, and instead of gaining weight, I grew noticeably thinner. He Chao frowned at me. "Is the palace cuisine not to your liking?" I remained silent for a long moment before shaking my head. He Chao turned and sharply rebuked the palace attendants serving me. "Guards, drag them out and execute them by beating." The man before me was no longer the youth whose every emotion had danced across his face like summer rain during our wedding. Now he carried the unspoken authority of an emperor that commanded respect without needing anger. The maidservant kneeling on the ground trembled uncontrollably upon hearing He Jiao's words. I quickly tugged at his sleeve and led him to the writing desk, where paper and brushes had been prepared ever since that day. It was this concubine's fault. "I beg your majesty for forgiveness." After finishing writing, I made as if to kneel as well, but He Jiao caught and raised me up. His deep eyes studied me for a long moment before he dismissed all the palace attendants with a wave. Then he spoke with certainty. "Why are you afraid?" My usually indifferent eyes suddenly narrowed. He Chao asked, "Why are you afraid?" He had actually spoken aloud the very fear in my heart. I stroked my belly, then sighed and decided to abandon the formal "your servant" address. Taking up paper and brush, I wrote, "I was born mute, an ill omen. When this child first quickened within me, how could I not have rejoiced? But joy soon gave way to terror, terror that he might inherit my imperfections, condemned to walk this world on thin ice. Terror that he might become a bargaining chip in imperial power struggles before ever drawing breath." But this fear ultimately dissipated in He Zhao's sarcastic remark, "I am not Minister Xie, and my palace is not the Xie residence." He Zhao somehow got wind of the news. And the very next day, he demanded that my wet nurse be sent from the Xie residence to the palace. As soon as Nanny Yun saw me, she grabbed my hands and burst into tears, repeating over and over, "My lady, you've suffered so much," holding Nanny Yun's hands. My own eyes also turned red with emotion. He Zhao stood silently by my side, and for the first time, I felt gratitude toward this young emperor who was equally bound by circumstances. After calming Yun Jiyu, I bowed slightly to He Zhao. He Zhao's gaze at me was filled with complexity, carrying an indescribable emotion. But in the end, he said nothing, merely nodded before walking away. It was only later that I learned He Zhao had personally gone to the Xie residence to demand my release and even inquired about my past from Yun Jiyu. I didn't ask, but I could guess what Yun Jiyu had told He Zhao, likely nothing more than how I had lived cautiously and fearfully in the Xie household. Hoping to evoke his pity, Aunt Yun said He Zhao was a good son-in-law. I then thought, if He Zhao hadn't been born into the imperial family but was just a young master from a common household, marrying a good person, he would truly deserve to be called a good son-in-law. Unfortunately, I'm not a good person. And He Zhao is no commoner, Aunt Yun. He is the ruler, and I am the subject, I reminded Aunt Yun, drawing a clear line between He Zhao and me, connected only by a marriage contract. Aunt Yun seemed to want to say something but ultimately let out a long sigh. Aunt Yun became the head matron in my palace, responsible for my daily needs. In this cold and desolate palace, I finally found some comfort. The second year in the imperial palace was not lively, even bordering on desolate. The emperor, having no heir, could not take concubines. As I had not been in the palace for long, the rear court consisted only of me and 2 other beauties presented as tribute from foreign lands. My increasing weight made movement difficult, so He Zhao exempted me from receiving noble ladies' audiences, only requiring my presence at the palace banquet. At the banquet, I immediately spotted my half-sister sitting before our mother, radiant as a flower. Compared to me, she and mother looked more like mother and daughter. Calculating the time, I realized it had been over a year since I last saw mother, who had never requested an audience at the palace. When I thought about it, apart from Aunt Yun, I couldn't imagine anyone in the Prime Minister's household who might miss me. I stayed barely long enough for an incense stick to burn before hastily leaving the banquet. Perhaps pregnancy made me sentimental, but a bitter taste rose in my heart. Aunt Yun handed me red paper and a sachet, telling me to write my wishes for the coming year just like I did before my coming-of-age ceremony, so they could be buried beneath the big tree. I knew Aunt Yun was trying to comfort me. So after some thought, I accepted them. I only wrote, "Peace year after year. May next year's peace include one more He Zhao." Lady Yun stood beside me directing the palace maids to dig a hole beneath the Osmanthus tree before the palace gates when He Zhao's voice suddenly sounded behind us. "What are you doing?" Startled, I turned around. Lady Yun answered with a smile on my behalf. "Her Majesty has made a wish for the coming year." He Zhao looked at me. "What wish did you make?" Somewhat embarrassed, with no paper or brush at hand and under He Zhao's frank gaze, I could only take his hand and trace those 4 characters upon his palm. Seeing that I had finished writing, He Zhao remained silent for a long while before finally saying, "If your wish includes me, then add more people on my behalf." That night, He Zhao insisted on keeping vigil with me, holding my hand as we walked several rounds along the palace walls. It was also on this night that I learned He Zhao was not the biological son of the late consort Hua. His mother was an unknown peasant girl who had been favored by the late emperor by chance. After giving birth to He Zhao, she was abandoned by the emperor and never heard from again. Both He Zhao's mother and I seemed to exist as if we didn't. There was a certain sense of shared sorrow in our fates. The relationship between the emperor and the empress in the harem improved. But a major incident occurred in the imperial court. He Zhao decided to demote General Qi, who had just achieved great merit. The Qi family had devoted their lives to military service, loyally defending the nation. This time, due to the urgency of the military situation, General Qi made a decision on his own, violating military orders. For this single mistake, He Zhao exiled him to the barbarian northern frontier. Everyone in the court understood the underlying reason soon after. He Chao promoted General Yin, a capable officer under my father's command, to the position of City Defense General. General Yin, now over 40 years old, enlisted in his youth due to poverty and rose to his current status with my father's patronage. He never expected to climb even higher. He Zhao's actions further confirmed those circulating rumors among the people. Many folk ballads emerged among the populace, all conveying the same general message. The current emperor was foolish and incompetent, framing loyal officials while only seeking to please the prime minister. He Zhao's actions forced my father to relinquish some of his power, lest people openly accuse Prime Minister Xie of overshadowing the emperor and manipulating the throne to command the nobles, which could incite rebellion among the populace. Aunt Yun never allowed me to worry, never mentioning these matters to me, and He Zhao, breaking from his usual self, stopped speaking of courtly concerns altogether, instead talking only about which official dozed off during court sessions that day, or whose hat sat askew. My body grew increasingly heavy. He Zhao would sometimes deliberately leave court early to massage my swollen legs. Even I began to wonder, was He Zhao doing this to put on a show for my father? Or was there something else to it? It almost seemed as if we were truly a harmonious couple. I didn't want to think about it, no, I didn't dare. The 6th day of the 2nd month in the 11th year of Zhenhe, the lingering chill of early spring still clung to the air, though the heated floors of the bedchamber radiated warmth. I felt as cold as if pierced by ice. The deafening roar in my ears drowned out whatever my half-sister was saying, her lips moving soundlessly before me. Today she had suddenly entered the palace, dismissing all attendants to speak with me alone. I had thought our mother sent her, never imagining such cruel truths would spill from her lips. Cwn, you don't actually believe your muteness was congenital, do you? Her words dripped venom. No wonder mother never loved you, my dear sister. You should have died long ago. She told me my muteness wasn't congenital, that it was poison administered by my own mother when I was less than a month old. All to overthrow noble consort who had nearly risen to equal status with her. Had it not been for the desperate pleas of mother's personal maid, Aunt Yun, my life wouldn't have been spared. Mother succeeded in driving a wedge between father and noble consort yet she couldn't bear to face me afterward. My very existence seemed like the most shameful stain on her life. After my half-sister left, clutching my stomach against the piercing pain, I wrote to Aunt Yun with brush and ink, Auntie. Was Wn Niang's muteness truly inborn? I saw Aunt Yun freeze for a moment, her eyes reddening, as if unsure whether to comfort her or me. Good child, don't dwell on such things. You must stay well, you must safely deliver the little prince. Never before have I felt such despair. Even when my parents showed no affection, when servants disrespected me, when my husband withheld love, and when the world treated me unkindly, I never once considered ending this wretched life. But Aunt Yun's reaction made me realize my half-sister's words were true. This congenital muteness was never congenital at all. My dear sister, you should have died long ago. No wonder mother never loved me. I was never meant to live in the first place. By the time He Zhao arrived, I was lying half-conscious on the birthing bed. Aunt Yun kept murmuring in my ear. She said mother had her reasons back then, begging me not to blame her. She said all suffering had passed, urging me to look forward. But how could I forget? How could I forget Cwn, the mute girl who was unloved by her parents, who could only envy her half-sister, day and night drowning in self-doubt and self-blame. He Zhao, disregarding all propriety, rushed straight into the hall, snatched the ginseng slices from the physician's hands, and stuffed them into my mouth, gritting his teeth as he said, Cwn, how dare you let my prince be born without a mother, just like me. He Zhao's words made my tears burst forth like a breached dam. Mother, my child must not be without a mother like I was. I gave birth to He Zhao's eldest son, whom he named He Lin. He Lin's birth eased the pain I had endured for many days. I stayed by his side every day, yet I refused to see Yun Jiyu, until one day, when I saw Yun Jiyu entangled with several palace maids and being pushed to the ground, I couldn't help but speak up to stop it, though I knew it was a trick to gain sympathy. My heart still softened. To be fair, this matter was never Aunt Yun's fault. Had it not been for her, I might have died in my swaddling clothes long ago. Aunt Yun was a loyal servant, devoted to my mother her entire life. It suddenly dawned on me that there was no one left in this world who truly stood by me. Aunt Yun told me that my half-sister's sudden entry into the palace was because my father intended to marry her off as a replacement bride to the 50-year-old Prince Rong. Having always been the favored one in the Xie household, my proud half-sister naturally refused this match. But the matter was already settled. She knew full well that in our father's eyes, we children were merely chess pieces, unable to alter his decision. She grew to resent me, the one who had always been less favored than her, yet had married He Jiao and become empress. His Majesty declared in court that out of pity for Prince Rong's arduous service and great contributions, he bestowed upon him 20 beauties. When Aunt Yun said this, her expression was peculiar. Before the new bride could even cross the threshold, her husband was gifted 20 beauties. Anyone would find this unsettling. I realized this was He Jiao venting his anger on my behalf. I don't know what to feel in my heart, but the sorrow isn't as heavy anymore. He Lin's features resemble He Jiao's so much that He Jiao adores him dearly, visiting the palace daily to bond with his son. Thanks to He Jiao's instigation, the Xie family's influence grew too prominent, and no one at court dared propose making He Lin the crown prince. Yet everyone knew this situation wouldn't last. My father refrained from overthrowing He Jiao to claim the throne only because regicide and usurpation couldn't secure popular support or pacify the common people. Helen's birth also meant my father had a better candidate to hold the Son of Heaven hostage to command the nobles. He Jiao is in grave danger. Even I noticed the unusual atmosphere in the palace, yet He Jiao remained calm and composed. He even hired a sign language instructor from the common folk to teach me and all the palace servants in the Empress's quarters. He Jiao said that once I mastered this sign language, I wouldn't need to carry paper and brush anymore, just a few gestures, and he would understand what I was saying. He also mentioned that when Helen grew older, he would have him learn it too. He Jiao's gesture further convinced Aunt Yun that he was a good son-in-law, and she advised me to treat him with the ways of marital harmony. But how could I dare to truly and completely entrust my heart to the Emperor of Great Ju? On the day of Helen's 4th birthday, my father could no longer restrain himself. He led nearly half the court officials to pressure He Jiao into naming Helen as the crown prince. Over the past 2 years, He Jiao had gradually built his own faction. He rejected the court's request to appoint a crown prince, then promptly promoted General Yin, my father's right-hand man, to a higher rank. He also conferred the title of noble consort upon General Yin's only daughter, scheduling her entry into the palace at an auspicious date. The Yin family rose to prominence overnight, becoming the newest aristocratic power. Even if General Yin remained loyal to my father, he would no longer enjoy the same level of trust as before. The authority granted by He Jiao fed General Yin's growing ambition. He was certain that General Yin would swallow this enormous bait, hook, line, and sinker. The arrival of the noble consort put Yun Jiyu on high alert, and she ordered someone to keep watch at the palace gates for He Chao's movements every day. At first, things were fine. He Jiao still came to my palace daily, and even the noble consort frequently visited to pay her respects. But at some point, He Chao's visits became fewer, and the noble consort's appearances to pay respects dwindled along with them. The court was restless with speculation, and anyone could see that He Jiao intended to place great trust in General Yin. Meanwhile, the inner palace underwent a sudden shift in power. The palace servants whispered that the mute empress had fallen out of favor. Lady Yun was frantic with anxiety. When Consort Shu came again to pay her respects at my palace, Lady Yun, acting on my behalf as the empress, ordered Consort Shu to kneel outside the palace gates. I knew that as the mother of the nation, I should reprimand Lady Yun. Yet even I couldn't explain the bitterness in my heart, nor why I silently condoned her actions. Seeing this, Consort Shu's attendants immediately went to inform He Jiao. In less time than it takes for an incense stick to burn, He Jiao rushed over without delay. Right before my eyes, he helped Consort Shu to her feet and gently brushed the dust from her knees. I had intended to step forward and say something, but under He Jiao's icy gaze, I retreated in silence. I knelt down. He Jiao was truly furious. He grabbed my arm and pulled me up, his voice cold as he said, "What, is the Empress trying to defy me?" I lowered my head. He Jiao coldly flicked his sleeve aside and announced my crimes to the crowd. By my decree, The empress has failed in virtue and is henceforth confined to Changchun Palace. Consort Shu need no longer pay her respects to the empress. He Zhao turned his back on me, no longer looking my way. Also, the eldest prince has reached the age for schooling. According to custom, he should go to Chonghua Palace. That He Zhao, whose wings were not yet fully grown but still stood up for me, seemed to drift further and further away, becoming someone else's. After He Zhao finished speaking, he left with Consort Shu. I knew that from this day onward, the empress's fall from favor would no longer be just a rumor. Yun Jiyu said I had developed a new habit these days. I often sat by the window in a daze, sometimes for an entire morning. After He Zhao stopped coming, my palace became much quieter. Fortunately, there were no issues with the people in the empress's palace. Every day when He Lin finished his studies, I could go to Chonghua Palace to fetch him, and we would have dinner together. On the way to Chonghua Palace, the most frequent gossip I heard was about how He Zhao had bestowed lavish gifts upon Consort Shu, or how he had taken noble consort on outings to various places. The underlying message was clear: Consort Shu was now the emperor's favorite. And if it weren't for my father's powerful position, my status as empress would have long been usurped. In less than half a year, Consort Shu was promoted 2 ranks to become imperial noble consort, and General Yin's influence also rose accordingly, nearly matching my father's power in court. I didn't want to get involved in these disputes. I only wanted to protect my He Lin. Helen was very well behaved and had learned his manners exceptionally well. To see me more often and to avoid angering Ha Zhao, Helen would wake up half an hour early every day. He would first come to Changchun Palace to pay his respects to me, accompany me for breakfast, and then go to Chonghua Palace for his studies. I felt sorry for Helen and wanted him to sleep that extra half hour, but he refused. The little one declared firmly, "If father doesn't come to see mother, and if I don't come either, how sad mother would be. I can't bear to see mother sad." I thought to myself, even if the emperor is heartless, at least I have my Helen. On the day of Helen's 5th birthday, He Zhao allowed him a day off to stay with me at Changchun Palace. The day after his birthday, Helen still refused to leave. For the first time ever, he lingered with me for an extra quarter hour during breakfast and even ate half a bowl more. When I urged him to go study, he remained unwilling to move. I gestured sternly, pretending to be angry. And only then did Helen reluctantly head to Chonghua Palace. Since beginning his studies, he had rarely shown such childish behavior. As he left, he even fussed like a little scholar, giving Yun Jiyu lengthy instructions to take good care of me. Yun Jiyu couldn't help but laugh as she repeatedly agreed. While my heart swelled with warmth, someone like me, how could I be blessed with such a wonderful child? But I never imagined that even my precious child would leave me. It was barely noon. Just a few hours after Helen had departed, when a palace servant came stumbling in to report, "Your Highness, the Crown Prince is gone." I pushed away Yun Gu's outstretched hand meant to steady me and staggered toward the servant. The servant kowtowed before me. Just before noon, someone delivered an oral decree from His Majesty summoning the Crown Prince to the Imperial Garden for an audience. But when people realized something was wrong, the Crown Prince had already fallen into the lake. By the time they pulled him out, he had stopped breathing. My heart ached as if pierced by knives. Yet I forced myself to press forward. I had to find my Helen. Who could have imagined that just steps beyond the palace gates, I'd be intercepted by He Zhao rushing to block my path? When He Zhao saw me, his first words were an accusation hurled at the palace attendants beside me. "Who told the empress?" The attendant who had brought me the news earlier trembled as they stepped forward and knelt. He Zhao's gaze bore into him like a predator about to devour its prey, his voice icy as he commanded, "Drag him down and behead him." I shielded the palace servant with my body, tears streaming down my face as I gestured frantically at He Zhao in protest. Why won't you let him tell me where He Lin is?" I clearly saw He Zhao instinctively reach out toward me, only to cruelly withdraw his hand the next second, gnashing his teeth. His voice carried an indescribable chill as he said, "The Crown Prince accidentally drowned. His body has already been encoffined. My condolences, Empress. Accidentally drowned, an obvious trap." Yet He Zhao claimed He Lin had drowned by accident. I struck He Zhao with desperate fury. The palace maids aghast but not daring to intervene, until I could hear nothing more and fainted away. When I awoke, night had fallen. Aunt Yun kept vigil by my side, offering porridge with relief. Your Highness, you're awake at last. Tears welled up in my eyes as I turned my face away. Seeing me like this, Aunt Yun's eyes also brimmed with tears. Your Highness, please take just one bite. If the Crown Prince were to see you like this, his heart would surely ache. I shook my head, merely gesturing to Aunt Yun with my hands. Aunt Yun, I want Helen. I want my Helen back. But my wonderful Helen could never return. When my health improved slightly, I went to keep vigil for Helen. He Zhao had sealed the coffin early, cutting off my hope of seeing Helen one last time. I curled up beside the cold coffin, refusing to leave no matter how much Aunt Yun tried to persuade me. The night was heavy with dew, and I suppressed a low cough. Behind me, He Zhao's footsteps faltered slightly, perhaps in a momentary daze. I actually detected a tremor in his voice as he said, Xie Wanyang, you must live well for me. As long as you live. I didn't hear the words that followed, as I ultimately succumbed to the exhaustion of recent days and collapsed once more. According to Aunt Yun, He Zhao stood by my bedside for a long time that night, but in the end, I could never bring myself to forgive him. He Zhao came to see me twice more afterward, but each time I coldly turned my back to him without acknowledgement. He Lin was not the crown prince, and by the rules of the great Zhu dynasty, his body should only have remained in the palace for 7 days. Yet, perhaps out of guilt, He Zhao allowed He Lin's coffin to stay in the palace for the full 49 days of mourning. With Helen's death, the court became increasingly tense and hostile. Before Helen's body had even grown cold, my father, citing that the nation could not be left without an heir, led the Xie faction to pressure He Zhao before the palace to adopt a successor from the imperial clan. He Zhao refused. The next day, the head of the Imperial Medical Bureau examined consort Xu and announced that she was pregnant. Coincidentally, this was the day before the mourning period for Helen's encoffined body was to end. I stood by He Lin's coffin as usual, sewing a lake blue robe I had prepared for him. In my childhood, to please my father and mother, I practiced music, chess, calligraphy, and painting day and night, but I had no talent or skill in needlework. After He Lin was born, I only made some undergarments for him, never any other robes. Watching the needle and thread swiftly pierce through the fabric, I lost myself in a momentary daze, wondering if my He Lin, in the halls of the underworld, would laugh at his mute mother for making him this rather unflattering garment. A prick of blood on my fingertip snapped me back to reality, and the next moment, I heard Consort Xu's voice ring out outside the palace. His Majesty has been blessed with a new heir. Won't you come out to congratulate him, sister? Your Highness, I'll have someone drive Consort Xu away. Beside me, Aunt Yun tried to rise and leave, but I pressed down on her hand. Consort Xu entered surrounded by palace attendants. Sister, you'd better discipline your people properly. I am now the imperial noble consort. Don't address me incorrectly in the future. Aunt Yun stepped in front of me. This servant must beg your pardon. Then may I ask, Your Highness the imperial noble consort, what brings you here today? The noble consort bypassed Yun Jiyu directly and came straight to me. She took my hand and pressed it against her abdomen. Sister, feel this. Doesn't it feel exactly like when you were carrying the crown prince? I tried to pull my hand back, but the noble consort held it firmly in place. Yun Jiyu was also blocked by the palace maids the noble consort had brought, preventing her from coming closer. The noble consort leaned in close to my ear and whispered, Xie Wn. Do you know who enlightened me, saying that if I eliminated He Lin, I would ascend to the position of empress, and my son would become the crown prince? As I stared at her in shock, the noble consort slowly curled her lips into a smile and said, It was His Majesty, the one who shares your pillow every night. At that moment, it felt as if my liver and intestines were severed, my heart torn apart and bones eroded. Consort Xu's words seemed to drift from the distant heavens. Xie Wn. You can't blame others, blame only your Xie family for failing to win the emperor's favor, failing to win the emperor's favor, failing to win the emperor's favor. So it was He Zhao who couldn't tolerate my He Lin. Aunt Yun said that He Lin probably didn't want to see his mother looking so despondent and heartbroken on the final day of his farewell. On the last day of He Lin's vigil, I, for the first time ever, let Aunt Yun dress my hair. I begged Aunt Yun to find me the clothes I wore before marriage, and dressed in plain blue-white garments, I stepped into the palace hall where Helen's coffin lay in state. Since the day I fainted before Helen's coffin, Aunt Yun had forbidden me to stay alone in the hall. I gestured to her. After today, I'll never see Helen again. Please, Auntie, let Wn Yang speak with Helen one last time. Just like in my maiden days, I leaned against Aunt Yun's shoulder. She gently stroked my hair and finally sighed, granting my wish. As Aunt Yun withdrew with the palace attendants, I handed her an embroidered box to deliver to Hajao. Aunt Yun took it and then earnestly advised me, "Good child, His Majesty is the Son of Heaven. The palace cannot be without concubines. Do not let this matter cause further discord between you and His Majesty. You and His Majesty will still have children." I nodded obediently with a gentle smile. The palace doors slowly closed, and the candlelight flickered inside the hall. I draped the newly sewn lake blue robe over Helen's coffin, then retrieved the lamp oil I had secretly hidden last night behind Aunt Yun's back. Had Aunt Yun opened the brocade box, she would have seen the calligraphy copybook my father gave me inside. Who in the great Zhou dynasty doesn't know that father's calligraphy is peerless, forming its own school that none can imitate, making scholars across the land flock to it like ducks to water. To frame the meticulous Prime Minister Xie with the crime of colluding with the enemy and treason, only the characters copied from this calligraphy scroll would suffice, and I knew He Chao had everything prepared. The only missing piece was this very accusation. That no one in the world could imitate father's calligraphy was the shield he left for himself, yet it also became the sharpest blade He Chao could wield against him. The candle toppled onto the oil already spilled across the floor, its flame instantly illuminating my calm and indifferent face. I leaned against He Lin's coffin and gently closed my eyes. Enough. This life holds little meaning. If there is a next life, I only wish that He Lin and I would never again be part of the noble or royal families, but simply live as an ordinary mother and child. Xie Wn, Xie Wanyang. He Chao knelt before the palace steps, cradling Xie Wan's lifeless body clad in plain white robes. His bright yellow imperial robe was scorched in large patches, still smoldering with scattered embers. Xie Wn, get up, I forbid you to die. I am the Son of Heaven, I forbid you to die. No matter how the palace attendants pleaded, He Chao clung desperately to Xie Wan's body, refusing to let go. Until a small figure came running from afar, crying out "Mother Empress." Through tears, He Lin picked up the lake blue outer robe that had fallen near Xie Wan's feet, the same robe He Chao had retrieved amidst the flames. Already unremarkable in appearance, it now bore several charred holes. Yet He Lin cradled it as if it were some priceless treasure, hugging it to his chest as large teardrops rolled down his cheeks. "Mother Empress, please wake up, it's Lina's fault. Lina shouldn't have deceived you, shouldn't have listened to Father Emperor's words to trick you." Had Xie Wn opened her eyes that night, she would have witnessed the emperor, the very sovereign she dared not trust with her heart, the aloof ruler who held power over life and death, kneeling in supplication before deities he had never believed in, praying for her safety. She would have seen the haughty imperial noble consort Shu trembling on her knees before He Chao, begging for her life. On the 14th day of the 8th month in the 16th year of Jianhe, Emperor Genuan of the He dynasty ordered officials to seize the Xie residence, presenting letters as evidence of Chancellor Xie's collusion with enemy forces and treason. In retaliation, Chancellor Xie led rebel troops to storm the imperial palace that very night. At the critical moment, General Qi, who should have been stationed at the desolate frontier, arrived with 200,000 troops to protect the emperor. Flames lit up the sky as blades clashed in battle. The 8-year struggle for imperial power was decisively settled on this fateful night. Prime Minister Xie perished, the Xie faction was annihilated, and Xie Wn, the legitimate daughter of the Xie family, passed away, posthumously honored with the title Empress Rongda. It felt as though I had a very long dream, where I never suffered from muteness.
Centurion, Lady Yun said that on the night he learned the noble consort had come to see me, He Chao drew his sword and held it to her neck. It was General Yin who saved the noble consort's life by sacrificing his military merits and future prospects. At this point, Lady Yun sighed and remarked, "Such a willful woman, yet she has a father willing to abandon his future for her. Indeed, thinking about it, I actually feel somewhat envious of her. In my father's eyes, I will always be nothing more than a chess piece. Lady Yun urged me to have a good talk with He Chao to clear up the misunderstanding. But I just smiled and shook my head at her. I know that He Chao had no choice but to arrange He Lin's fake death and consort Shu's false pregnancy, and his actions were understandable. Yet, in the end, I could no longer face him as I once did. As the palace gates grew distant, I lowered the curtain by my hand, feeling a lightness in my heart like never before. From now on, the journey ahead is long and arduous. I only wish to find a secluded village among peach blossoms, spending the rest of my days with a cup of clear tea. Extra, He Lin's perspective. I am Helen, now 10 years old. It has been over 4 years since Mother left. After Mother's departure, the palace grew increasingly desolate. Petitions urging the emperor to take new consorts fluttered like snowflakes onto the desk where Father reviewed memorials each day, only to be sorted into piles by the attending eunuchs and consigned to dark corners, gathering dust. Father refused to take any more consorts. Even the 2 foreign beauties who had been in the palace before he assumed power were sent away. Father said that in his lifetime, he would only have Mother as his wife and only me as his prince. Every day, updates about Mother's condition would be rushed back from Taosan village outside the imperial capital by messengers arranged by Father. The letter was just a thin sheet, recording nothing more than the trivial details of her daily meals, yet Father would read it over and over again. I asked Father, if he missed her so much, why didn't he go to see Mother? Father said he had failed Mother, which was why she neither wished nor wanted to see him again. At this point, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of melancholy. Not just Father, even I, as her son, had deceived Mother, yet I fared far better than Father ever did. In her spare time, Mother would mend my shoes, socks, and clothes for me, and when my birthday came around, Father would send me to Mother's Taosan village. On the eve of my 11th birthday, I bid farewell to my father, the Emperor. The Emperor had a palace attendant hand me an embroidered box containing a fine inkstone, his customary birthday gift, prepared in advance for me each year. I thanked him, and after a pause, he added, "You should leave early today. She must be eager to see you as soon as possible." I acknowledged his words with a yes, but couldn't resist asking one more question. "Does your Majesty have any message you'd like me to convey to the Empress?" I gazed at the Emperor in the hall, not yet 30 but already with strands of white hair at his temples, staring blankly at the memorial in his hand before finally shaking his head after a long while. The Empress Dowager adapted well to life in Taosan village, though mute. Her excellent calligraphy skills led her to frequently write letters for the surrounding villagers. Over time, people from all the neighboring villages came to respectfully address her as Madam Scholar. She told the villagers that she had separated from my father, leaving me in his care, and thus could only visit her once a year on my birthday. The villagers would then gather around me, chattering endlessly with admonitions about how I must be filial to my mother in the future. I responded with an embarrassed expression, and when I looked up, I saw the faint smile at the corner of Mother's lips, her eyes seemingly twinkling with mischief. I think I understand now why Mother didn't want to stay in the imperial palace. The world is harsh and unkind to women to begin with, let alone for Mother who was in the imperial palace. I stayed with Mother for 3 days, and before leaving, I asked her, "Does Mother have any words she'd like to say to Father?" The Empress Mother touched my face, then shook her head just as the Emperor had done that day. When the Emperor had faked my death years ago, I once asked him why he couldn't inform the Empress Mother in advance. He said he had promised her not to involve me in the imperial power struggles, yet he broke that promise to her. He couldn't bear to face the Empress Mother. The Emperor said that back then, Prime Minister Xie had lured him into a trap using the imperial examinations as bait, breaking the newly grown backbone of the great Jew's ruler. He still remembered those 43 newly selected scholars kneeling in prison, covered in filth and blood, yet their words rang deafeningly clear. "We only pray that Great Jew may soon purge its court, punish Prime Minister Xie's faction, and restore our dynasty's golden age of clarity. Though we die today, we have no regrets. For the sake of this emperor, for the Great Jew, countless men of ambition have died without regret. I cannot retreat." He had never failed the Great Jew, yet he alone had failed his mother, so when she expressed her wish to leave, he granted her freedom. I had thought this would be the way my father and mother would spend the remainder of their lives, until that day when the Shadow Guard, as usual, brought my father news of my mother's whereabouts. Upon reading the words on that missive, even my father's countenance, normally unshaken by the collapse of Mount Tai, showed a flicker of emotion. At that moment, I was helping my father grind ink when I caught a glimpse of the letter out of the corner of my eye and froze in shock. The letter said a hunter had proposed to the queen, The man was honest-looking and treated her exceedingly well. I noticed the emperor's hand holding the letter was trembling slightly. The emperor sat alone in the hall all night. No one knew what thoughts truly passed through his mind during those long hours. The very next day, Father Emperor left the palace for Peach Mountain Village. According to the villagers of Peach Mountain Village, that day, a handsome young master from the capital suddenly arrived at the matchmaker's house in the village, seeking to marry Lady WN of the Xie family. After that, Father Emperor's visits to Peach Mountain Village became increasingly frequent. By the time I turned 16, Father Emperor abdicated the throne in my favor and moved to Peach Mountain Village. From that moment on, there was no longer an Emperor Genuan or Empress Rongda in the world, only He Xiaoming and Xie Wanyang.